What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Recover Out Loud, episode number 82, brought to you by the Antisocial Network. Today, we got a super awesome guest all the way from Auburn, Washington. We got Sergeant Q, Aaron Quinonez. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Sean. I really appreciate it.
No, man, thanks for being on. It's pretty awesome when I get another vet on and I'm able to speak our lingo a little bit and share some experience, strength, and hope with people.
Awesome. Yeah. So it looks like you were in the army, right?
I
So tell me
was.
about that.
Oh man. Well, it was a wild time. I enlisted in '06, got out in 2019, got medically retired for traumatic brain injury. As a paratrooper my whole career, from Vicenza, Italy with the 173rd, 82nd with Fort Bragg, and then 425 in Alaska. And it was a wild time in my life.
It's
What about
awesome.
you?
I was in the Marine Corps. I spent 8 years in the Marines. I joined a small little special forces group called First Anglico. We're the Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company. So we're your FOs. And I did a ton of work actually with the Army. I've jumped with the 82nd and the 101st. I've done a lot of work with oh my gosh, the Rangers
Mm.
doing op for them out there doing JRTCs, stuff like that. So Anglico, we do a lot of work with a lot of different groups out there. We'll get tasked out with a variety of different special forces groups or conventional forces. So yeah, I had a lot of good times. I'm a master parachutist as well. So our wings look a little bit different than yours. You guys have the curled wings. Ours are extended out. So,
Yeah.
but same qualifications.
Well, you're speaking my language because I was JFO qualified as an FO.
Nice. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of us out there in the world. It's a very unique skill set. The cool thing about Anglico is we can call in, fast movers or rotary wing, but we can also control naval gunfire, mortars, and artillery. So we can bring all of that to bear. And our job in Anglico, really, our mission is to support whatever unit we're attached to. So we don't have a specific mission of our own except to support whoever they attach us to. So you could attach one Anglico Marine to like a SEAL team or something like that, or you could have a group of Anglico Marines supporting the Rangers as they go in to do like an HVT extraction, something like that. Or you can just have us out there on an outpost and we're supporting conventional forces when it comes to like third ID or a Marine Corps tank unit, that's going to be moving into an area. We support that whole unit by bringing all these different elements to bear.
Out of all the elements that I was able to use at my disposal, the only one that I was never able to control was naval gunfire, and that like kind of still chaps me to this day. Where I've gotten to use helicopters, I got to use the Kiowas, the Apaches, I got to use A-10s, B-1s,
Mm-hmm.
all of them. AC-130 was another one I never got to control, but I mean, it's special forces, right?
Yeah,
It's
dude,
those
I
it's
never got to
those two.
control. I never got to control one of those either. Those Spectres, I never got to push one of those either. But
Oh,
yeah, so I feel yeah.
yeah, yeah, but I mean, like, it still chaps me to this day that like I never got to control naval gunfire. I was qualified to do it, never got to do it. It's wild,
Yeah,
wild.
it's
But
it's
go
it's
ahead.
kind of gone away now though. They don't use it a
Yeah,
whole lot anymore.
no, no, they don't. So, uh, would you like to give a formal introduction of yourself?
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm Sergeant Q, or I'm Aaron Quinonez, but most people they know me as Sergeant Q. And so, like I said, I worked for about 8 years with the Marine Corps with Anglico. I got out. I was really struggling with mental health, and I couldn't keep a job. And so I just started a little janitorial company, and I've grown that now to have about 130 employees here in the Pacific Northwest. And during that time, I was like super struggling with mental health. I couldn't get help that I needed from the VA. And so I just started figuring it out on my own by reading the Bible and reading a bunch of medical journals. And I created a program. About 7 years ago, the Lord called me to lead other veterans to find that same healing. So I did. And now I am the founder of an award winning nonprofit, Q Missions. I also work part time as the chaplain for the Seattle Seahawks Task Force 12. And I have a technology company as well. So I built some tech to prevent suicide. It went through a medical study. We had it was a year long study or 10-month long study that And we had a 90% reduction to readmittance to the emergency room for suicidal ideations. And so now we've taken that and everything that I've learned in the veteran space, and we're bringing it to the civilian community. And I work a lot with First Nation people. I just got done working with the Choctaw Nation, putting on a mental health event for them. And so that's kind of what I do full time now. All those other things I've kind of stepped out of, and now I full time work in the mental health space, helping other people recover from trauma.
Well, I think you already know this, but you're doing God's work, and I want to say right off the bat, thank you for what you do for for vets and for humanity as a whole. It's very important what you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's I never thought I'd be doing any of this work, man. I got to be honest. It's crazy. And all these awards that I've received, I got to be honest, I didn't really do anything to get these awards. I was just trying to help other guys be successful. And then when they found some measure of success, people would recognize it. And then somebody would nominate me for an award, and I'd get a letter in the mail and give some dinner or have to give a speech. And I'm like, I didn't really do anything. I just showed this guy what I learned. And he's the guy who's out there, making it happen. So it's just funny how God opens those doors, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But that's the thing is like, and I believe this wholeheartedly is that, and I think I said this to you before I hit record is everybody's story is important, and everybody's story is going to help the next person in line. So I had to hear 10,000 stories from people, you know, and before I got clean and sober and started
Mm,
working on my mental health in order to get to that position where I could. And same with you. You had to hear 10,000 stories of people suffering in order to get you to where you are. And your story is part of that 10,000 that somebody else needs to hear, right? And I think it's
yeah.
highly important. It's
Yeah,
very important.
exactly. Yeah, I try and tell people that like my organization that I run and the company that I have now, I don't ever want it to be this top down organization. I want to be a platform where people can come, get suited up, learn these soft skills and these hard skills, and then go out there and make a difference in the world. And that's what I try and tell people. Sometimes when you get that disability rating or people say, "Hey, you've got this diagnosis now," it really it harms people more because now they're like, oh my gosh, now I can't do anything, right? And what I try and share with them is that despite your disabilities, you can still go out there and make a difference in the world, and I show them how to do it, and then they go out
Absolutely.
and change the world, man. It's incredible. I got a guy, Patrick Wright. He's a Marine. He went through my program when I was very early on, and I showed him the way on how to do this stuff, and he went home and started helping other veterans do repairs on their homes, and that turned into him starting a nonprofit. So I showed him how to do that, how to structure it, how to get supporters, do all that. And he created the largest and most successful homeless veteran program on the Oregon coast. I mean, the guy's just doing incredible work out there. um, and I just, like I said, just showed him what I learned, by reading medical journals and the Bible, and he took off, and it's just doing incredible things.
Yeah. What's the saying? Teach a man to fish.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, and that's so important. You equip people with the tools to be successful, right? And it's not just about being successful, but it's about being happy and being at peace with yourself. Because a lot of where that unrest lays is lack of peace and then being unhappy and being unhealthy. And when you start teaching them, how to be happy, how to be peaceful, how to find that peace, and how to be successful, everything falls in line.
Yeah, it's incredible because when I can, show them these stories of other people that have done these things, and then I tell them like this is how it works, right? Like when you implement these strategies, and then I tell them why it works. I share with them the brain body connection, where when you're doing these things, your brain is producing these chemicals which make you feel this way, and that's why you continue to do these things, and that's how you recover. Because our motto is healing through service. If there's healing through serving God and serving your community, and I show people the fundamentals of that. Like this is how it works, and this is why it works. And I show them how the brain operates with these scientific research studies, and it clicks for people.
Yeah, yeah. There's that missing link, that you provide for them, and that's amazing. That's simply amazing. So, let's go ahead. Let's dive into it. What was it like for you in your struggle?
I felt alone a lot. I think that was one of the biggest things was isolation. So I left the Marine Corps and I came up here to the Northwest, and I didn't have any other vets or anybody else with that shared experience. So I felt very isolated and alone, and I think that was one of the major contributing factors to my mental health declining as quickly as it did. Because think about it, in the Marine Corps or in any military service, you operate as a squad, right? You always have a guy to your left and to your right. You've got a platoon sergeant above you, and you've got troops below you that you're taking care of. So there's 360 somebody, looking out for you, making sure that everything's okay. And when you get out, you don't have that anymore, and you got to do everything on your own. And that was really difficult. It was a huge culture shock for me. Plus, dealing with the mental health issues that I was dealing with, there was nobody I could really talk to. And the VA has gotten better now, but when I first got back, man, it was a nightmare. I got back in '04, and they were not prepared for any of us to come back. And I really just got over medicated and pushed out the door. And that was it, which made things even worse for me. So I quit going and just started self medicating. And it wasn't great either. It got so bad where I ended up losing my marriage in the span of about 6 months. I lost my marriage, lost my job, and was living in my car, traveling up and down the Oregon Washington coast, just trying to survive. I would get good jobs, but I couldn't keep them because I wasn't managing my mental health. So I'd get angry a lot. I'd get fired a lot. I would, have all these conflicts. I could do a really great job at whatever it was I was doing, but nobody liked to work with me, and that was the problem. I was very antisocial, which
Yeah,
was I think a lot of us deal with that, and so that's what it was like for me when I was in that really dark place. And the darkest place that I got, it was on the 4th of July. And I hadn't slept in a couple of days. I kind of felt like my body was buzzing because I had so much anxiety and cortisol and adrenaline just like coursing through my veins. And I was just driving around trying to find a quiet little place to end my life. And I drove into this vacant parking lot, and I figured this is it. This is where I'm going to just, quietly end my life. And so I parked next to the building and just rolled down the window because it was a little warm. I get a little breeze on my face, and I could hear these kids playing on a playground not too far away. And I thought, oh, I'm going to wait till these kids take off so I don't got to deal with this. And I just waited and waited and waited. And the next thing I knew, I woke up. I'd fallen asleep. And when I woke up, those suicidal ideations were gone. So I put my pistol away and went on about my day. A couple days later, I got invited to go to church, and I was like, "No, thanks, man. Not into the whole religion thing. Not for
yeah,
me." But that Sunday, I said, "What the heck? I'm going to go check this thing out." So he gave me the address. I drove to the address, and I drove right back into that same parking lot that I'd almost ended my life in just a couple of days before.
wow,
And that was a trippy feeling, bro. I remember driving in thinking like, "Oh my gosh, did I actually die? And now I'm living some weird Groundhog's Day now, where I got to get this day right. Like, what's happening?" So I sat in the parking lot and I waited for everybody to go in. And I thought, oh man, like my palms are sweaty, right? Like what is going to be in there when I walk in those doors? Like I have no idea. But I did. I went in the door. It was just a church service. They're worshiping. I listened to the pastor talk, and I kept going back. 2 or 3 weeks later, I gave my life to the Lord, joined a small Bible study with some guys, and I started reading the Bible at the same time I'm reading these medical journals and figuring out there's this incredible parallels between what the Bible says and what science is proving today. And that helped me create a little program for myself to overcome trauma. So that's what it was like, man, in those deepest, darkest days, almost into my life.
yeah. It's wild because the story that you told, I've heard a lot from different people, right? Like they've waited. I had a friend a few weeks ago call me and say, "Hey, I attempted to kill myself," and I went out to this location where I didn't think there was going to be anybody there, and there's somebody sitting at a bus stop,
Mm,
and he was like, "I'm just
mm-hmm,
going to wait for that person to leave the bus stop so I don't have to watch this,"
mm,
and that person never left. Well,
mm-hmm.
they did, but they ended up my buddy woke up and was like, "Wow, everything changes, right?" And that's happened to countless others, and it happened to you, and that is amazing. And then just to drive back to the location as a reminder.
Yeah, it was so bizarre. So totally bizarre. And now that I understand the brain body connection, right? I understand there were some grounding techniques that were happening. Like when I rolled the window down, I could feel the breeze on my face. That was bringing me out of that subconscious state. When I could hear those kids, that was bringing me back to reality, to get out of that subconscious loop that I was stuck in. And so all these little things, that really helped me. And one of the practices that I do now when I start feeling anxiety really bad and I can't get it to turn off, I'll just go find a place to take a nap, and
Yeah.
that'll reset my body, stop producing those chemicals. And so that's how I can get out of that. And so I've developed some other skills along the way, but it's funny because in the Bible, it talks specifically about this. So in Isaiah basically, he was the first fister, the first forward observer,
Yeah.
right? So he calls down, if you guys aren't familiar with the story, he calls down fire from heaven and kills all of his enemies, right? And then he's like totally freaked out. He's like, oh my gosh. And so he runs because he's afraid the queen is going to be after him. So he takes off and he's running for like 2 or 3 days, not sleeping or eating. And he finally just collapses. He's so riddled with anxiety that he just prays to God. He says, God, just take my life. Like I'm so stressed out just in my life right now. And God sends in, and then he falls asleep, right? And when he wakes up, the Lord had sent an angel to give him some water and some food, and then he took another nap. And so I'm like, okay, this helps, right? Because when you take a nap, it resets your body. And a quick way to get out of that subconscious loop is that's your fight or flight brain, and then you have your feed and breed brain. And so the feed and breed brain, if you eat something or drink some water, it engages your swallowing reflex, which brings you back to that conscious state of mind of, oh, I need to find substance to eat, and it brings you out of that subconscious fight or flight. And so it's just funny because the Bible specifically talks about that, and science proves it today. And so when I wrote my book, there's tons of those comparisons that I put throughout the book.
Well, that's awesome. And I think a lot of people take the word hangry for granted because that's a real thing, right? Like
Yeah,
I
man.
I know for me, dude, if I'm hungry or angry, like it's going to be bad. So I need to put something in my body. If I'm tired, right? Like I got to go to sleep or I'm going to become a rage monkey. Um, but it's all too true. People don't realize like the impact that sleep has on your body. They don't realize the impact that food and water has on your body. They don't healthy food. I mean, okay,
That's right.
McDonald's can do something for you too, but still, it's not the best. Okay,
Right, right.
but
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with it. You're absolutely right. You put good in, you get good out. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you spoke earlier about that feeling of loneliness and desperation, and what I like to call an identity crisis when you get out of the military, right? I call it an identity crisis because we go from having purpose and we go from having, structure, go from having a family, not having any of that, right? Like I know when I got out, dude, like I had zero of everything, right? Like I didn't have a purpose. I didn't feel like I had a direction that I was moving in. I felt like I didn't have family. I was secluded from everybody that I knew that would support me. And so for me, it just bogged down so much. And I had that identity crisis. And like you said, stepping into different jobs and positions, and your mental health wasn't in check. You were reflecting how you felt because of that identity crisis.
yeah, it's so true. I have a whole chapter dedicated to identity in my book where we talk about you got to find your identity outside the uniform, right? And really outside of whatever your job is, because I work with a lot of police, firemen, EMTs, nurses, doctors, right? All these professionals, and their identity is so steeped in their career, whatever that is, that when they can't do that career anymore or they retire, it's like, well, who am I? What do I do now? And so they will still experience that same type of crisis that you were just talking about when it comes to identity. So finding an identity out of what you're or away from what you do as a career is so vital for anybody out there, not just the military.
I had a counselor come to me and speaking of identity, he came to me and this was one of my first sessions with this guy, and I love this man to death. He's awesome. He was like, "Hey, who are you?" I was like, "Well, I'm Sean." He's like, "No, that's your name. Who are you?" I was like, "I don't know how to answer this, man." And he was like, "Tell me, who are you?" And I was like, "Well, I'm a father." No, that's a title. And everything that I was saying to him, he was spitting it back and saying, no, 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 you have to find out who you are at your core,
Hmm.
not what the world has put on you or labels that you put on yourself. Because at the end of the day, that's just what the world sees. That's not what you see.
That's
And that's
right.
not how you reflect. And so, speaking about that, when you're speaking about that, has there ever been a time where you looked at yourself in the mirror and been like, "Who are you?" and not been able to be like, "I know."
Yeah, that there's such wisdom there with what you just said. So I really want people to absorb that. What you just said is so powerful. And at the moment, if you guys are hearing this right now and it's just kind of brushing over your head, just I want you to take a minute and just think about that question that Sean just asked me. Who are you? Not what you can do, not who people say you are, but who are you? And so for me, I found my identity in Jesus. And so I am son of the God Most High. Right. I am a co-heir to the kingdom of heaven through the sacrifice of Jesus. And so have found my identity in something that's not tangible here in this world. It's much larger than myself. And it's much harder to lose that identity than being a firefighter or being a Marine or being in the army, right? All of those things can be taken away from you at a moment's notice where you can no longer do those things because of an injury or something. But when you find your identity in something greater than yourself, like I find my identity in Jesus, that it that extends past time and space. And so you don't feel that sense of loss because that's never going to be taken away from you. And that might be hard for some people to understand, but that's where I find my identity. And that's how I get through those hard parts that still come in this day and age. I just went through a week that was really, really difficult, a lot of travel, a lot of speaking. And when I do get up on that stage and I speak, I'm giving those guys everything I got. I'm being very raw, open. It's very emotionally draining for me. And then I spend time with them afterwards, right? Talking with them being able to connect with me, helping them, giving them resources. And so I'm totally drained. And when I was coming back, I always feel like, man, did I do enough? Did I really make an impact? And it was really, really tough. So I still have those moments, and I just have to remind myself that my identity isn't in my performance that I just gave. My identity isn't in the impact that I made, but my identity is in Jesus, and He sent me there. So as long as I went there and I did the best that I could, that is enough. Doesn't matter how it was received. I was obedient and did what God called me to do, and He will take care of the rest. But it's so easy for us as humans to put all of this ownership on ourselves to get to that next level or make this certain impact or do these certain things, and sometimes we fall short of that. But for me, how I overcome it is just remembering that I find my identity in Christ, and anything I do, I'm working for the Lord and not for man.
Yeah,
So kind of a long
absolutely.
answer, but that's where I find it, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people get offended by that question of who are you because
Hmm.
they've been asked that question so many times, right? But in a context of being condescending or being threatening,
Yeah, I didn't
instead
even
of
think
like,
about it like that, but you're right, man. It has such a negative connotation to it. I
yeah,
didn't even
like,
realize that until now.
yeah, like when he asked me that, it pissed me off. I was like,
Yeah.
you know who I am? I know who I am. He was like, no, 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 who are? And I was like, what are you asking, man? Like it was
Yeah.
just this unsolvable riddle that I just couldn't get at that time. So if you're watching this and you're hearing it, I want you to really look at yourself in the mirror, not in a derogatory term. Look at yourself in the mirror and say, "Who are you?" And then really think on that, and then write it down. Just things that come to your mind, write them down, and see how
Yep.
many things that you have piled upon yourself. Cross them off. Once you get to those core values and core understandings and those beliefs that you have of yourself, you'll be able to start on that path.
And here's something that's really unique. I work a lot with pro football players, and they deal with this too. When they're no longer a football player, who are they, right? These people
Yeah.
who are at this highest pinnacle of performance, because all of their self-worth, all of their identity is in their performance. And I work with some Olympic athletes as well through another organization, and they struggle with this when they can no longer, and these guys peak at like 16 to 20.
Yeah.
these Olympians. And so afterwards, like, who are they? Because all of their self-worth and identity is in their performance. And when they can't perform anymore, what good are they? And so it's a super dangerous game to play. And pro football players deal with this exact same thing. So if you're out there and you're struggling with this, like, you are not alone. We're all dealing with this thing. That's why we're talking about it. That's why, Sean and I are bringing this to your guys' attention. Like, who are you? You got to find that out for yourself. And it has to be away from your performance, what you do as a job, your performance, your ability. It has to be outside of that. Otherwise, it could just be a dangerous game to play.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And I interviewed somebody for one of the other shows that I work on, and he spoke a lot about how athletes deal with the same issue of who am I after
Mm-hmm.
they get injured or after they quit playing, whatever sport they're in, and even actors, right? He was a stuntman, and he was like, when I left being a stuntman, I had no idea who I was, and it was terrible. It was hard. And so, like you said, we all get attached to these professions, and then we automatically say, "That's who I am. I'm a customer service agent. I'm a podcaster." No, but there's so much more to you underneath all that, and I think that it's important to break through that barrier of of what we put on ourselves. So, Sergeant Q, we're gonna move forward, and what was that pivotal moment for you that you may be able to pick out, you may not be able to pick out, where you said things have to change and I have to change?
Yeah, so there's a few moments, right? But I'll recount one that I talk about quite often. I was driving with my wife, girlfriend at the time, down to Oregon to go visit some friends, and I'd driven halfway. And I said, "Hey, you're going to drive for the next like hour. Wake me up before we get to this mountain pass because we need to get some gas. It's dark, and in Oregon you can't pump your own gas." So I was like, "We need to stop in Cottage Grove so we can get some gas, and then I'll drive the mountain pass." And I woke up because she wakes me up and she's like, "Hey, we're taking the turn for the mountain pass, and it's middle of the night, it's dark, and I know that there are no gas stations that are going to be open on this pass." And I look at the tank, and we're literally on E, and so we've got to turn around and drive back like, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes to be able to get fuel. And now I'm freaking out because we're going to run out of gas, we're going to be stranded, this whole thing, and my brain just starts firing off, and I'm just yelling at her, right? And she's like, "Whoa, what the heck is going on?" Because I'm yelling and you know uh, freaking out. And we switch places. I get in the car and I take off. And like I said, I'm just yelling the whole time. And we go get gas. We do this whole thing, and she asked me, she's like, "Why does that bother you so bad?" Um, and kind of like that question that, who are you? It made me upset. And I'm like, "Well, because, it's irresponsible. We could run out of gas and this and this. And because in Iraq, when you run out of gas, you die." And she said, "Oh." I was like, "Oh, that's why. Wow.
That came out.
Okay." And so it's like, a lot of times we just go through life and we just, "Oh, this is just the way I am," or this is, it's we make excuses for our bad behavior, right? It's really easy to do, to blame shift. It's somebody else that caused this, right? My wife was irresponsible, she didn't get gas, that's why I'm upset, right? And it's okay to be upset, but it was not okay for me to act the way that I did, to have that big of an outburst over something like that. So why was I acting that way? And that's the first time anybody had said, "Well, why? Why did it bother you so much?" And that came out. And so that was a game changer for me when I'd look at myself behaving badly or having this action or activity that I was like, "I don't want to do this. Why am I doing it?" And I would have to go back to that core. And it just started unraveling this web of trauma that I had. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going through my life doing all these things, and this is why. I could just start picking them out and pulling these strings and unraveling these things in my mind. And so for you guys that are listening, think about that. When you catch yourself like behaving badly or doing something that you're like, "I wish I hadn't said that or done that." Why? Why was that such an intense reaction for you? And more times than not, it's going to link back to some trauma that you experienced that triggered that outburst that you had. And so don't work on the symptoms. Don't work on, oh, you need to get your anger under control. No, 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 no. Anger is a good emotion if used properly. You need to go back to why. Why was that anger outburst inappropriate? What was the core reason? Don't treat the symptoms, treat the cause. And so that's what I really try to help guys focus on, is finding out, like, what was it that caused you to have such an overreaction, and let's start working on healing that piece of you.
Absolutely. And that's, I've done that too. I've done that too. I've done that too. It's like, I get so upset over a battery not being changed for something that I need. And I'm like, if my battery dies in my radio, and I'm like, well, I'm not in Afghanistan anymore, right? Like, a battery is not going to, give me that chance to live or die.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, getting to the core of like why you felt that way is really hard. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Is don't try and treat the symptoms, work on the problem, because that's what doctors do all the time. They treat the symptoms. They don't try to get to the core of the problem, and all you're doing is just shaving off the layers. You're not diving deep into that actual problem.
Yep, and that work is hard, so people don't want to do it. They just want to put a band-aid on it and move on to the next thing. Um, but that's not a long-term solution at all.
No, absolutely not. And then you hit something that absolutely blew me off my rocker when I heard it the first time. And this was at a at a VA counseling class, and it was, your anger is not bad. What? What? Literally, the counselor said, your anger is not bad. And I'm like, what? My anger can get a whole lot worse. And she's like, no, it's not bad to have anger. It's okay.
Hmm.
It's what you do with it that determines how bad it gets.
That's right. It's how do we direct that? And it talks about that in the Bible, to have righteous anger. It says, "Do not sin in your anger." It says, "Don't be angry." It says, "Don't sin." It's your action. What do you do with that anger when it comes on you? And so it's kind of the same thing, like a weapon. A weapon
Yeah.
is only as dangerous as the person holding it. If you've got somebody who's trained and can use that weapon for good and to protect people, then it's great. But if you got that weapon in the hand of a madman, it causes destruction. Well, anger is a weapon. If you're going to wield it, you have to do it responsibly. And if you don't, you're going to cause a lot of collateral damage.
Yeah, absolutely. I facilitate groups for veterans that are justice involved in Alaska, and somebody came into one of my groups. At first, I didn't believe what he was saying to me, but I thought about it, and I was like, he's absolutely right. He said, "Anger is my drug. It's not
Mm,
alcohol because I don't drink. It's not any of these harder substances because I don't do them. Anger is my drug because it releases that dopamine that gets me going and I like being angry." And I sat there and I was like, I love being angry too. And that's a hard reality to face. Like, at one point in my life, I loved being angry. I called myself the Incredible Hulk.
yep.
Hey, and people would say, why are you, is it easy to turn it off? And I said, I'm always angry. Right? Like, I live my life in anger.
Hmm.
Was that kind of like how you were?
Yeah, absolutely. There's countless stories that I could share with you where I would just snap at the drop of a hat. And I'm not a big guy, but I was a close combat instructor in the Marine Corps, so I definitely know how to work with these things.
Sure.
And I used to get in fights all the time, and that anger. So what that anger does is it releases cortisol and adrenaline, and we're addicted to that, right? And we get the dopamine hit. And so when we get angry and we get hyped up, that our brain's producing all those chemicals that flow through our body, and we remember that, right? Our body recognizes that. It's like, okay, it's go time. And so you're right, it is like a drug. Absolutely. And what I tell people is, I feel um like I have this caged gorilla, this 900-pound gorilla inside my chest. And he's just sitting in total darkness with one little pin drop of light on him. And he just sits there. And people come up and they poke at me, they rattle that cage, and that gorilla just shakes that cage, like, let me out of here, right?
Yeah.
Just rip somebody apart. Um, but the strong person, it's very easy to fly off the handle and to lash out in anger. It doesn't take a lot of courage to do that. Anybody can do it. And you see it happen all the time. Just put on TikTok or YouTube, right? You see it all the time. People fly off the handle like crazy. It takes no discipline, no skill, no obedience, no intestinal fortitude to do that. Super easy. The strong man can hold that and not disperse it out into public. It's the
Yeah.
quiet anger that we can disperse. And if there is a real threat, then we know we can handle it. But the strong person can hold that gorilla back and not let it go out and cause a bunch of damage in the world. And so it's stronger to be reserved and not lash out in our anger than it is to lash out.
Oh, absolutely. And I find it the hardest. And I spoke to my girlfriend about this, and I was sharing with her like how bad some of my anger issues were, and she said, why do you get so angry? And why do you writhe in that and like live in that area? And I said, I was never taught how to turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
The military, and I'm pretty sure you can attest to this, get angry, right? If
Yep.
you're sucking on a run, get angry. You're sucking on a ruck march, get angry. If you're out there about to go on a mission, dismount a mission that's it's going to be a week, get angry, right? And when you're back and everything is done, they don't teach you how to turn it off. And then, so now you're stuck with get angry, get angry, get angry. So now that evolves into I'm gonna go on a car ride. I'm gonna be super aggressive and get angry for no reason, right? And then that's when what causes events to happen, or hey, I'm going into this conversation that has a hostile undertone, but I'm gonna get angry and amplify it, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
now we're learning how to not necessarily turn that anger off, but shift focus and change the anger and calm down that caged gorilla, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's not easy, but it's one of those soft skills that you have to learn. Because if you get angry, you lose control because you become all those chemicals make you very narrow focused. And now you can only see things one way and you can't see other opportunities or other directions or other avenues of approach for whatever that is, that conversation. Just say it's a conversation with your boss, right? And if you go in and you're angry, you can only see things one way, very narrow minded, and you're not going to be open to any other new ideas. You're not going to be open to any other possibilities, and you're really just going to dig into that position and it's not going to work out well for you. So if you can not be angry and allow yourself to be open to other possibilities and to just accept responsibility. So many people in this country nowadays don't want to accept responsibility for whatever it is that they did, right? They
Yeah,
want to blame shift onto somebody else. And so when you can just take responsibility and ownership for your stuff, it surprises people. Like, oh wow. Like, hey man, I'm sorry. You're right. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said that to that person. You're absolutely right. Uh, how can I do better next time? And people are like, wait a minute. What?
yeah.
What do you mean? Because they expect you to come in with a fight. They expect you to come in and blame shift. They expect you to come in and make excuses. And when you don't do that, when you just take ownership and say, you're right, I messed up. How can I do better? It takes all the wind out of their sails and then they're not going to be angry. And then you find resolution.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I couldn't agree more. So moving forward, you obviously start working on yourself and start changing the way that you think and the way that you act, um, and you start your nonprofit. What are you doing now? You alluded to a little bit of what you're doing, but what are you doing now to give back to your community and back to the world?
Yeah. So with my nonprofit, I teach veterans that there's healing through service, there's healing through serving your community. So volunteering. And so I do a tremendous amount of volunteering in the veteran community for that with my nonprofit. But then I take these guys and we go all over the world and we build churches, schools, orphanages, we dig wells, we put on leadership conferences, for pastoral staff. And so we do that. And so I take guys with me to go do that. And so I've been all over the world, probably been to like 30 different countries, Haiti, Honduras. I've been to South Africa. I've been to Rustenburg. I've been to Swaziland, Kenya, Malawi, Cambodia, Taipei. I mean, I could just list all these places, Brazil, that I've gone and worked and done ministry. And so that's what I do now to give back and to keep myself steady. And so I learned that when I first started going to church and I got invited to this small group with these guys, and then they were all going to go to Mexico with the church to build a home for a homeless family. And I was like, I'm not really into that. But I went. And when I went, I was like, oh, wow, I feel something other than anger, right? I feel joy and happiness. And I have tears leaking out of my face. I'm like, what is this? I need more. And so I started volunteering and just going. And that's where the Lord taught me that there's healing through service. And I talk about that in my book. And my whole nonprofit is based on that one principle. And so that's what I do to give back. There's over the years, there's been a tremendous amount of civilians who've wanted this same type of training. And so just this year, we started putting something together for civilians where I'm starting to take them on this trip. And that's really our big thing. So coming up in 2024, I'm going to be running mental health retreats for civilians. Veterans can go too. I still do my free one for vets every Memorial Day. But this one, if civilians want to go, and we're really targeting industry leaders. So if you are a CEO or like an HR director or a manager somewhere where you have a sphere of influence and can help your people uh, build better mental resiliency, those are the people that I want to talk to. Not that I don't want to talk to other people, but this trip is specifically designed for leaders to learn these skills so they can take them back to their sphere of influence and make good impact in their communities. And so they'll come down to Mexico, and in 2 days, we'll build a home for a homeless family, and I will teach this entire curriculum. So we'll come down, and in 2 days, I'll teach, and then the next 2 days, we'll build a home where they'll get to actually practice all of these soft skills that we teach them, and then I send them home where they can continue to pour into others and hopefully pour into whatever demographic that they have a sphere of influence in. And so that's where we're going to start is with people in leadership, teaching them these same things that they can now take back and replicate in their own communities.
That is amazing. That formula is amazing. You know, you're getting out there and you're providing service work for other people, but you're also teaching other people how to be, resilient and how to work past the things that bother them. Not necessarily in a counseling standpoint, but in a community standpoint, right? And
That's right.
that's pivotal. That is pivotal because you're not sitting in an office and being like, "Hey, man, let me throw a diagnosis at you." What you're doing, you're saying, "Come with me," much like we do in the service. Come with me. I need some volunteers,
Yep.
and then
I
you
try and
go.
tell people that I want to act as a cadre for them, right? Like I will lead you through this process and teach you so you can go back and replicate it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that it's amazing that you want to have CEOs and HR involved in this because it, there's a lot of stigma that surrounds those people in positions of power that they
Mm-hmm.
don't care and that they're bitter and that they just don't care about anybody below them. And maybe that might be right to some degree, but you're able to break that shell, right? Able to break through that stigma that either they've put on themselves or that other people put on.
What I found more often than not is that that's the minority of people, right? The majority do care. They just don't know how. They don't know
Yeah.
what to do, right? And so they're hungry for this knowledge. Like, yes, please teach me. And so, like I said, I've had a lot of people reach out and want to learn this stuff. And I was just focused on veterans, but now I'm branching out to help them because there's a lot of people who really are hungry to understand this. And those people, and what I can tell you are the people who do have that complex where kind of that power hungry or they're pushing, you know, pushing people around and doing things like that, they're operating from a place of trauma themselves. Most times they don't want to admit it, right? But when they're acting that way, they're behaving badly, when they're talking down to people, when they don't care, when they're grinding people out, they're operating from a wound themselves, right? And so if I can show them this, uh, kind of like I did, right? Like I'm acting this way. Why am I acting this way? If I can show them, like, hey, you're operating out in a wound, and so you're bleeding on people. Let me show you how to do something different. Because they're not happy because you can only grind somebody so long before they quit. And then you've got to train somebody else. And that's a whole bunch of other work you've got to put on, right? Or if people are unhappy and people are grumbling, then you're not being as effective or as efficient in whatever task you're trying to accomplish. So, what I've done to scale my janitorial company is I just started investing in my employees and I started investing in their leadership, in their mental health, in their families, and helping them be successful outside of my job. And what I tell people is, look, you are either going to grow with my company or you're going to outgrow my company. Either way, I want to help you get there, you know? And so
Absolutely.
that's what I've been trying to work on is in my company. And I've been able to scale like crazy. So I don't even really build my janitorial company anymore. I empower my people, I educate them, and I empower them to go ahead and scale my company. And they've done it, you know, and I just come by and encourage them along the way.
Nice. So you're an entrepreneur, you're an author, you're a speaker, you are all these things. How do you're operating at such a high level, and have been for some time. How do you find time to take care of yourself, and what do you do to take care of yourself?
I read a lot of books and I fish. I am
Mm,
big time into fishing and art. So I like to draw, and I love to fish. And so those are two things that, you know, it's funny because my guys are like, "Hey, we're starting Q." Well, he's either on mission or he's fishing. So, which is kind of true. So that's what I really love to do. I like playing video games, but not by myself. You know, like
yeah,
I'll get on Call of Duty or something, but it's not very fun unless I've got my buddies playing with me.
yeah,
Um, Same thing, like I've got an Oculus too, because I grew up as a gamer as a kid,
yeah,
but gaming is more fun. For me, gaming was about having your friends come over on a Saturday, you know,
yeah,
or come over on a Friday night and you spend all Friday night and Saturday playing games together. And
yeah.
now all my friends are in different states, but because of the internet, we can all get on a game together and play for a little bit. And so it's that camaraderie, it's that squad mentality that's so important.
Being a gamer, what is your favorite game of all time? Because I'm a gamer myself.
First to fight. First to fight. It was on PlayStation, and it was a squad-based game for Marines. It was based on a Marine squad. Most people hated this game because it wasn't a run and gun game. You couldn't just run and gun. It was very tactical. It was a four-man squad or four-man fire team, and you had to control each one of the guys, and they were AI too, right? So you build up their stats, and you've got a machine gunner, and the more time trigger time he's got, the better his stats go up, and you're trying to create all these guys to grow their stats. But if one of those guys gets injured, then you got to pop smoke, throw it over there, you know, bring them out, get them a medic. They're going to sit out for a couple games, and then you can bring them back. But if that guy dies, then you can't get him back. You've got to start with a brand new guy and start training them up. And so most people hated that, but I loved it. So First to Fight, it was based on the Marine Corps fire team. Fantastic game, very tactical. You know, you had to tell your guys where to go, stack on this door. You know, I need two guys to post inside while the other two sweep around. So you had to do all these tactics as you're under fire, right? So there's no pause in the middle of a battle. So you've really got to think on your feet. Really difficult game, but that probably would be my favorite of all time. What about you?
That well, that's crazy. So, oh, I've never heard of First to Fight, but that sounds highly entertaining and really hard. Um, I would have to say, of all time, it would have to be Mortal Kombat 2.
Okay.
Or I'm a huge professional wrestling fan, so like WWE and all that stuff. So No Mercy or WrestleMania 2000 on 64. But currently, my favorite game is Minecraft. I can get
Mm-hmm.
lost in Minecraft for hours,
Okay.
just for hours, and there's so much rinse and repeat in the game, but it's just so amazing. It's a sandbox game, but it's so fun. It's very enjoyable. So before we get going, Sergeant Q, where can we find you?
So yeah. So sergeantq.net, so sgtq.net. And if you're interested in one of these events that we talked about, where we're talking about going to do like these mental health retreats, or you want to connect with me to try and get me to come out and do a training or speaking engagement, something like that, you can go to info@qactual.com. So QActual is my technology company. So info at and then the letter Q actual.com. And if you're interested in the tech, it's free. You can download it and use it. If you want to bring it to your team, then there's going to be some fees attached to that, and I can talk to you about it. But yeah, that's really the two best ways. You can find me on all of the socials. You know, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, And you can also find me like on TikTok. I put out mental health videos every single Monday. I have my own podcast called The Mental Health Janitors. We help you clean up the mess in your head. So it's myself and another Marine, or I'm sorry, an Army. She's an Army medic, and we talk about different mental health components and how to utilize them. So it's pretty entertaining. You guys can check that out as well.
That's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. All right, we're about to wrap it up, but I have one question. What are you grateful for today?
Hmm. I'm really grateful for my church family. Uh, the men in my church did something pretty awesome. So if you guys go on my social, you'll find it, my Facebook. They I just come back from this training, and they know it takes a lot out of me. And plus I had a dog pass away at the same time, and so it's really kind of just heavy. And so I was coming back from the airport, and I drove into my driveway. I have a dirt road driveway, and there's all these signs posted in my driveway, and I'm like, what the heck is this? They look like Claymore mines, but they're these huge, like
Yeah,
plastic signs. I'm like, what the heck? So I go out there and I lift them up, and there's a note on the back. And so a bunch of the men in my church got together and they wrote all the things that they appreciate. So each one of them had a sign, and they wrote on the back like what they appreciate about me. And so it was super cool to get that. And what I ended up doing was I took that, all of those, and I brought them back to my secretary. And so she's taking all of those and putting them like on this graphic with a and she's going to put that up and frame it, put it in my office. So that was what I'm grateful for, the men of my church.
that's amazing. That's pretty cool. I don't think I've ever had anything like it, and that's cool. That's really cool. Sergeant Q, I want to thank you for taking a minute of your time and hanging out with me and sharing your experience, strength, and hope, and what you're doing to give back to the world. Because I think what you are doing is very important, and it's a selfless job. And it's not even a job, because a job implies that you don't enjoy what you're doing, but you do love what you're doing, and that's the most important thing. So thank you from one human being
Absolutely.
to another, one vet to another. Thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for lifting people up when they can't.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Sean. I really appreciate it.
All right, and everybody, thanks for hanging out. Go give Sergeant Q a look, and maybe you're gonna find something that you never thought was there before. So until next time, much love, y'all. Be good.